to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Moved by Roger, second by Greg. How long were you anticipating, Mr. Fafley?
Good.
You're still on mute.
Through our overhead system, I believe we need 20 minutes. So till 8:50.
Okay.
Yes.
We could let's do the Pledge of Allegiance real quick, and then we will jump right into executive session.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
World just stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Sorry about that. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to enter into executive session until 8:50. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
At this point, we will be sent to a meeting room and put up a message on our stream so that folks know we're going into executive session for the purposes of dealing with a personnel issue of a non-elected personnel, and we'll return in 20 minutes.
Greg and Shannon, do you have options to join on your computer to join the breakout room?
We'll get staff back in here and close the breakout room because that will end the echo.
Do we have everybody in place, Bill?
We are 7 of 8 and ready to go. Can
Okay.
you hear me through the overhead speaker?
Yes. All right, we will start with agenda item number 17, review of the spectator protocols.
Item 17 is on the agenda for the board to share any of their observations from the restrictions on attendance and other issues and other mandates that have been put in place by the board of directors, and have that dialogue. If we're going to, the restrictions on spectator attendance expire on January 28th and on January 29th. The previous language that was adopted, which empowers local school districts to make determinations relative to restricted attendance, is in their hands. The guidance from the board is that it would be in compliance with local, or with the ability to do social distancing. And then they determine their capacity. We've heard from some districts that can't wait for that to happen. We've heard from other districts that would like to see the mandate from the board continue on. But this is an opportunity for you. If you want it to continue on, there would need to be a specially called board of directors meeting. And then that action could take place at such a called meeting. Absent of a call, the timetable will continue on calendar with the restrictions in place through January 28th, and then local control January 29th and after, contingent upon the ability to social distance. So open for your discussion, President Stein, as you deem appropriate.
Okay, yeah, like I said, we will open the floor for discussion on spectators protocol. What are you guys thinking or seeing or hearing from your areas?
I guess I can start. Three Rivers League people would like to see this continue as it is, or maybe step it up a step and maybe allow 3 or 4 per student. But they are really concerned about some of those boards of education just open it up and making it unmanageable for them. So I think that and also Parsons School's the same way. We'd like to see either stay at 2 or maybe step it up a step or 2, but not wide open.
Yeah, those were our same discussions at our board meeting on Monday. Maybe looking at going to immediate family, like we were saying, that sleep under the same roof, maybe opening it up to 3 or 4 for that purpose as well. But not just opening it for a free for all.
The Northern Plains League, we discussed it, and they'd like to see it continue with the way it is right now.
I would agree with Alan's comments. The discussion that we've had, and we haven't met as a league in a little while, but potentially immediate family is what's been kind of discussed in our area. Concern about completely opening it up because of the discrepancies on how people do address the crowd. I mean, that's already been noticeably different depending upon where you're at.
I think, just from our league and mostly out of my district in particular, we felt like after the date, if we were still going to limit it based on our local, decision by our board, but it would probably remain again at 2. We were not going to go immediate or under the roof. We were going to go 2 tickets per to give that opportunity for grandparents or give that opportunity for boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be, but allow those 2. But it would limit our numbers, but we weren't going to be as specific to guardians, parents, or under the same household. But again, an extension by us would set that precedent. Inevitably, even if we were to go to a larger number, it would still allow local to make it smaller if they felt that was their choice.
At the High Plains League, we're pretty much in agreement, I think, with what's been said here. I know most of us have liked the fact that administering games and how officials have been treated. It's been relatively easy to handle basketball games. I do know that not in our league, but there are some schools out here in Southwest Kansas who maybe don't disagree and maybe aren't following the protocols to the T. And for some reason, I'll get calls and ask what they should do. And my answer is, I'm not in position to make that decision for you. But, it's that situation where one school who's going to follow the rules goes to another school who they're not as strict on the protocols, should they even go. And so those are just some of the issues that we dealt with in the past. What's really helped, though, is that the mandate that we're all going to do the same thing. And so I know a lot of schools out here in this area would probably like to see us just go straight back to local control. But if you remember right, the issues we dealt with local control was a lot of people on the other side said, if we all follow the same rules, it would make it a whole lot easier for everybody. And so I think that's probably where we are. It's a lot easier if the Activities Association just mandates it and then we all have to follow it. If we open it up to local control, then we're going to run into some of those same issues that we dealt with before.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Bill, and it's hard to quantify probably, but would you say you've heard more one way or the other, or has it been pretty dispersed and across the board, or what have you heard?
We've probably heard more of a request from school people, probably the same, both. We want local control, but we also value that's probably a split. But we've heard from a large number of patrons who want some flexibility. They want local control for their local boards of education, and they certainly want an increase. They want grandparents, they want siblings, They want the ability to have, a single mom or a single dad, a single parent to bring a guest to go along with that, or to substitute for a parent that cannot attend, have been the biggest request for us. The restriction to parent or guardian was done, as you know, to provide a safety net for students that were participating in the case of some type of injury. That's why it needed to be parent or guardian. Those would still, in any scenario, we would become more restrictive and eliminate those, but expanding it would certainly be the preference of the association, either to defer it back to local or to allow some flexibility within the allocation of 2 per participant. Or to go to 4 per participant and not restrict it certainly to parents and guardians. We have a number of split parents, and part of that's quite honestly, the 4 is, we feel like it probably is, an Olathe school district school might be able to put those 4 in there and have the same safety components in place of social distancing or risk mitigation protocols. It would be a place that only 2 would fit in Hill City on a student by student basis. Because when it comes right down to it, there's 26 kids or 26 participants in any basketball game. You've got 12 players and 1 coach, and yet our gym sizes are very different. So having that flexibility at the local level allows for those things to take place. Though, Olathe may say, we don't want any part of that simply because it's a lot worse here than it is in urban, suburban, metro areas than it is in some of our rural and suburban areas.
I would say the calls that I've taken, the majority of the people like the consistency. They're concerned about what happens on January 29th when some schools just allow everybody and their dog in, no matter what county health says. And some schools try to follow the rules. That's the concern that I hear. I think the other concern is they prefer it not just be limited to parents, and possibly change the number from 2 to 4. Those are the things, and those are 2 calls that I've already taken this morning.
Keep in mind that if you go forward back to the board, I would recommend a very specific proposal as a starting point instead of an open agenda. It may well change anyhow. But also probably is going to impact postseason, and we go to much larger venues for our postseason, and they have the ability to do that. So we've tried we've been very intentional to follow through with regular season expectations into our postseason. So I think you're probably establishing a precedent for what the postseason attendance will look like too. We've already capped that at 50 by your action, 50% of the available seating. And we need to go to the 4 per, we certainly can do that as well.
Or it could be graduated, at postseason time. Now we're going to graduate it up to more.
Yeah, and that's right. It could be incremental.
It's got to be a sport by sport thing.
For postseason.
My postseason starts.
Well, what was your recommendation? Is it 2? Is that what they approved yesterday?
Nothing's approved yet.
They can't hear you guys speaking.
I didn't want them here yet.
So we've approved for basketball. You didn't get anything approved in your plan yesterday. Not postseason.
Is there any comments or questions from the board? Okay, so do we want to, I guess we got 2 options here. We could let it expire on the 28th. So then starting the 29th, as it's written, it would go to local control. Local schools would be able to make that determination of fan attendance and protocols. Because we have to understand that the masking protocol is in effect till the end of the winter seasons, because that was voted on as well. So that one wouldn't change, which is coming up next item. So I guess I don't need to address that one yet. Or we could send this to the board of directors for further dialogue and determination on whether it would be a blanket policy or if it would just, we would just leave it as an expired policy.
Hey, Bill, does the medical advisory team, because I know we're still 2 weeks out from this date, but I know we kind of went against their proposal anyway, but do they have any thoughts on this, on what they think the 28th might look like?
I think that their perspective is that, you know, we are expecting the worst right now, and it will gradually get better with the vaccine and with a distance between now and the holidays. But there's also some reporting challenges and some lulls in some of the reporting and the recording of data. So we have not asked them specifically about any type of tiered release. We certainly can do that and get that input prior to this board making a recommendation, and certainly would do that prior to a board of directors meeting. Brent has pulled up the language of what goes into effect. So you see that. I think that Brent. Go to the November 24th meeting. We're going to get to the place where that language actually is the very specific language that we've got on the November 24th Board of Directors action item. Sorry, we're navigating through the website so that you can see that very specific language that's there. And you'll see that the new written language, it's for the period of the winter activity regular season and postseason for this school year. Attendance shall be limited to allow for appropriate distancing for the facility and in accordance with local admission and attendance policy. So it goes straight back to it. The only requirement is there has to be local, or there has to be distancing.
So in a sense, does that limit the number of people who could attend because of the distancing requirement?
That is the intent of that language, yes.
So while they might, so a local district would probably have to make the determination of whether the entire community could attend or whether it would still be limited to, say, aunts and uncles and siblings and that sort of involvement instead of just anyone that wanted to attend. Or however they wanted to configure their attendance.
Correct.
And that's the piece here. You know, obviously anyone can limit a decision we make. If we move forward, you know, I would not support us leaving it exactly how it's written now and extending that, just me personally. But as Monty knows, because he's currently playing AD, it's hard to figure out who the aunt and uncle is or the cousin. I mean, we don't have a family tree of these folks who arrive, and that's why we were very strong with the parent and guardian piece, which puts our athletic directors, our athletic secretaries in a tough spot. So going back, if we do something, I could support it. It's just the tickets per participant, and and we're not going to have to validate who those people are. We don't have to find out if they're, aunt, uncle, or if they live in the same household or those types of things. It would just, we still continue our limited numbers. But again, it can be anybody who has those tickets. And with the way a lot of the ticket systems are working, we can control the amount of tickets per athlete. What we can't control is who has their tickets in their hand. So, again, as we continue to talk about this, I think, possibly raising that number, or at least changing our terminology from parent and guardian or household. And that, I know that's not currently in the language, but I wouldn't support anything that is going to limit who the people are.
So it could be handled somewhat like it was during football season, for example, that each student could have X number of tickets, and then whatever was remaining could be sold to other individuals who also wanted to attend. And as I recall, there were also a lot of students who were allowed to attend, and it wasn't just family members. It was a little broader in that sense. So is that kind of what we would probably see in a school?
I believe that would be accurate, yes.
Okay.
I think the unknown part is, like there's been reports of places that their limited attendance would be pretty much just open the doors and whoever gets there, when down the road, you could see a school saying, like Jason was saying, if they opened it up to 4 tickets per participant, or even left it at 2 tickets per participant, it would just be a matter of what site you were going to that evening, of how, if it stayed low, if it expires on the 28th, so then the 29th, it would open up to total local control. The social distancing piece, I think is probably will be overlooked when this becomes local control, because sometimes I think different places think differently about that appropriate distancing of fans and people. So that's an issue on that side of it.
I agree, Alan. I think that's the hard part, I mean, I know I envisioned when we were marking or putting adhesive stickers on our gyms for the, 2 per person and all, what's that look like if it became 3 or if it became 5, and, hand everybody a 6-foot 2x4 when they come in the door and place it next to me so that's or a wet pool noodle or something like that. I mean, those are thoughts that I had, to assure that distancing take place, and that's difficult. I mean, if that's your control piece is we need you to social distance, we all know how that goes over. I don't have an answer.
I'm with you on that one as well.
And the so many per student, which allows grandpa and grandma, and I'd love nothing else for my mom to be able to come to her grandkids' things and all. You're still mixing those family units a little bit more so than we are now, with it just being parent and guardian. Those continue to be things that are, health department, CDC brings up about not mixing, those under the same roof and all. So that precaution in place is pretty nice to have. So if you just went immediate family, but then you're left identifying who belongs and who doesn't, I realize as well.
I'm ready to make a recommendation if we're ready for that, Mr. President.
Yes, I was leading to that. I think we need to determine whether or not we want to push this forward to the board of directors, or if we want to let the original one expire after the 28th. So, Mr. Castle, you have something to say?
I would recommend that we call a special board of directors meeting to put the following language in place for the period of January 29, 2021 through the remainder of the regular winter activity season. Attendance will be limited to up to 4 per participant, allowing his local school districts to limit that for appropriate distancing of their facility. Something along those lines.
I'll second if nothing else, for the purpose of discussion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Castle to call a special board of directors meeting and to insert language of January 29th, 2021, beginning January 29th, 2021 through the end of the regular activity season or winter activity season, up to 4 tickets or 4, however you want to state it, per participant in those activities to properly social distance. Is that correct, Mike?
That's really close. Yeah, I know that the wordsmiths will make it right.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second by Dina. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, Alan, this is Monty. Can I ask the board members here that have dealt with this? Have you guys been handling it like, and is this the requirement that 2 parents, that's only for the game that their son or daughter is playing in? Is that correct? It's not for the event. It's for just their game, yes or no? Because that's what we do in order to allow room for everybody. So if I'm a girl's parent, when our girls' game is over, we ask those parents to leave. Is everybody doing it that way? No?
No. Games I've been to, they've let them stay. These are small schools with very few participants anyhow, but they've let them stay. If they bought a ticket, they get to stay for the evening.
Okay, so then I guess the way I looked at it, of course, a lot of that is so we will have spots for people to sit. But I looked at it like when I first read that, it was two parents per player for their activity. And then when that game was over, if I'm not a parent of somebody that's playing, I shouldn't be there. And that's how we've approached it out here. Because right now we're getting ready to try and have a league tournament. And we're going through all the protocols, but there are some that are asking if our girls team and our boys team are playing, can the parents of a boys player attend the girls game from that school? And right now we've said no.
That's the intent of the rule.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because that's what we're going by out here, that the whole intent was 2 parents per player for their game.
And Monty, I'll give you my perspective. What we did in our league just this year, and I can only speak to the Sunflower League, but we actually split our boys and girls opposite sites. Now I'm in a different situation with travel, right? So we can do that very easily. But I will tell you, we are not asking JV parents that were at the JV game and then the varsity girls, if it was a back-to-back, because about half of those kids sit on that bench. So, but I will tell you, I have noticed, and again, Bill mentioned it earlier, I have a different size of facility. It hasn't disrupted our social distancing and those types of things. So are we making announcements for people to leave? Have we told them that that's the expectation? Yes. Are we physically going around and asking people to walk out of the gym? No. So I just wanted to kind of answer it from my perspective.
And how I've handled it here, obviously, we've got parents who, they've got a girl that plays on the JV girls team, and then they've got a boy that plays on the varsity team, and we don't make them exit the building. But what we do is we ask, if your son or daughter's games have completed for the evening, we ask that you leave. And we really haven't had too many issues with it. It's when if we go from, say, 2 to 4, then that, from my standpoint, that will become more in play. Because the reality of it here is our gym is big enough that we could probably handle those sets of girls and boys parents from both teams in our gym and be socially distant. However, I looked at it like the rule stated that if your son or daughter's not playing, they didn't need to be in the gym, and that's how we've approached it.
Yeah, Monty, I know at the beginning of the year, we did that. We had a little handout, little half sheet at the beginning that said that was our expectation going in. If you're in the auxiliary gym for a freshman game or a sub-varsity game, that was what you were there for and all. I will say, as of late, and we haven't had that many home games yet, but you know, our entire mezzanine and our band plays. You know, we got a pet band that plays, so we allow for 2 participants for every pet band member, not all of who come. So you look in our mezzanine, and our mezzanine has been all but empty on several occasions. So a sub-varsity parent comes down the hall, says, you know, is it okay to go up there and sit? And we've said yes, just because we can accommodate it. Now, if every parent came, you know, even by raising this to 4, if this would pass to 4, we're not going to be able to social distance if we would go to 4, if we continue to allow for, you know, pet band and all of that as well. We would have to be a little tighter on that. So it's just kind of naturally happened because that's the way we started, but I haven't blocked the door for anybody, you know, just because we've been able to accommodate.
I would probably piggyback on what Greg said. Our band has not played. Our band may begin playing. They're currently not even in class because of our structure at our school. I do have concerns raising it to 4 or whatever the number may be. And I realize each district can restrict that on their own, but if we're getting back to a point where each district can restrict or do what they need to do, are we better off just letting local control have that piece? And in response to your comment, Monty, we're doing exactly what you're doing. We're asking parents to leave. They've been, honestly, I've been very, very proud of our parents and our opposing teams. They've done a nice job. I can't guarantee you that they're leaving at the end of their child's game, but if they're done participating, we're asking them to leave. Now, if a JV player also suits up for the varsity and they're in uniform, they obviously can be there. But if they're done participating, we ask them to leave. And I think a lot of our parents have done that. So I'm kind of on the fence on this because I don't know what's best, whether we just leave it to local control. And obviously each district can still restrict, but if you have bands and now we're upping it to 4, it's going to get tight. And then on the upping it to 4, is it just 4 people or is it family members? I think when the motion was made, there wasn't any regard to family members. It was just each participant would have 4. So, you know, those are things I think we need to consider. And obviously, if that's the direction the board would go, then we'll obviously, you know, work with that.
Thank you, Ken. Greg?
And I guess the one thing that coming back to all of this again, if we do raise it to 4, would we continue that's 4 tickets for that student's game only? Because that was, Bill, did you say that was the intent of the rule originally?
Yes, sir.
Because honestly, from my standpoint, it's been relatively easy for me to just simply say, listen, the Activities Association mandates that it's 2 parents for their game only. And my community has pretty much bought into it. Now, we kind of had an issue last home game, but for the most part, our community's bought into it. Most of our league's communities have bought into it, but there are still a few who probably haven't followed that policy. And the reason it's because, and I think Jason might have said, because their gyms are big enough that they have the room to space people out. And so they've allowed a girl's parent to stay for boys' games because they have the room. And so I guess, I mean, if we change this, would the policy remain in play that they're there for their son or daughter's game only?
Any further discussion? We have a motion on the table by Mike to call a special board of directors meeting for this agenda item. We have a second by Dina. Any further discussion?
We've placed what we believe to be the language that was proposed as a screen share for you to review, Mr. Castle, to make sure that captures the sentiment, and Ms. Horst, the second that you proposed.
Looks good to me as a good starting point for the board of directors. This discussion will happen again. And we may want to add, and I would be willing to add that the language also say to this is for their games only, to put it right in there again, so everybody understands that it's because I did not understand that. I suggested my league, but they didn't, most of them didn't follow on to that because they didn't think it was mandatory, that it was just for the game that their kid was playing in. So if we wanted to add that in there, that language in there some way, that's fine with me.
You know, and I'm also going to
As a seconder, well, I would be fine with that being added.
I am, I obviously want this to go to the board of directors because again, I think as a large group, I think we need to be very specific, like Bill said. You know, I agree, and I know that we heard a lot that local board, a lot of people wanting their local control, but I am too. I feel confident because I know that in my situation, even if we were to go to 4, there's a chance that my local board or decisions made in my district are going to limit that. It would not be 4. Maybe in a special occasion, a senior night, maybe we go to 4 in case there's a split family or blended family or something along those lines, or for grandparents. But ultimately, I have to also agree that if we don't do anything about this, we are opening some communities that maybe are in a different position to just open their doors and put other communities in a difficult spot when they're traveling. So I agree with what Mike said here. I can support the 4 because I know that at least in the situation in the Northeast, most districts are going to limit that probably. Some will allow it in some situations. I want people to understand that I do support local control. I just want to make sure that we're protecting all of our communities because not everybody's going to do the exact same thing. So I can support what we have written here to go to the board to have discussion.
I agree with you, Jason. Thank you.
Whatever language we put in front of the board of directors, I mean, right, can be revised and who knows what it will end up being from what we start with, but some well thought out what we start with and what we present. I can agree with, I can agree to put it in front of the board of directors.
As am I.
And like Jason said, I'm not sure where we locally would end up with it.
Okay.
I can tell you that there's a lot of gyms in our league that couldn't hold 4 spectators per participant in the gyms in the Northern Plains League. There's a lot of schools in our league right now. It's only allowing 1 spectator per visiting player.
And they could remain to do that. And would you foresee that happening? They would continue to do that?
Well, our league likes it the way it is right now. And, they've kind of said they'd like to continue it that way, but there are some gyms that probably could have 4 spectators. We have a few in the league that probably could do that.
Yeah, I like the piece on here where it says the local districts may choose to have stricter limitations based on the seating and local health departments. That still gives your league the option to limit it to 1 or the two.
We agree, Alan.
discussions.
I agree.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor to call a special board meeting for this item, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Bill, do you have an anticipated date in mind?
Get an announcement to our board, first and foremost, to our full board today, to the membership today, if at all possible, so they can begin to have that discussion and dialogue and reflection period. And then I would anticipate midweek next week, Wednesday, Thursday, might be the appropriate time for a special board meeting in this regard. And I would anticipate doing something either mid-morning or mid-afternoon on either Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday might be the best day because there seem to be fewer conflicts with activities. I have not looked at the calendar from the association perspective, but this trumps just about everything else we're doing. So let's shoot for Wednesday unless there's a conflict at Wednesday at 2 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 18, masking protocols.
This is an item that we wanted to bring before you to get your input and clarification relative to interpretations of progression through a postseason tournament. You know, during the regular season, we have always said and continue to say that schools have the ability to take our foundational policies and add additional layers of restrictions on that. We see that happening with local school districts having mandatory testing, having fewer seating opportunities, having certain things that they have put in place that they believe are appropriate for their school and school community, and we applaud those efforts to help maintain that. But as we get to the postseason, and what that means during the regular season, that if two schools didn't agree on that, that they could call it a game not played, and simply say, we're not going to make our kids wear a mask when we come to your facility, or we're not going to make our kids wear a mask when you come to our facility, even though that was an expectation that some of our schools maintained. So they just called that a game not played. They tried to reschedule it. They tried to reschedule with each other if things were to change, or to find other opponents during the regular season. That's not possible in the postseason, because in the postseason, it's the survive and advance. You've got to participate, you've got to play, and you've got to win to be able to advance. And we'll have some teams that qualify for the postseason to host events in the postseason, and they have some expectations relative to their students, which is absolutely appropriate. But they also have some expectations relative to visitors that might come in to their facility to be masked. And that seems to be where this falls is, do we want to, as an association, or do you want to, as an executive board, empower staff to provide an interpretation that says the local school district can mandate that upon a visiting school that they must wear a mask in the postseason, or if the visiting school says, oh, we're not comfortable in wearing masks, it changes the way the game is played, it changes the way the competition is conducted. We do not want to wear a mask when we come to play, because that is not a requirement during competition. I'm only talking about the competition side of things. We know all around masking is universal, and that it must be worn by coaches, by players on the bench, by bench personnel, table personnel, etc. But when you enter the game and you take your mask off, are you allowed to take that mask off if you're a visitor in a school site? And so we're looking for guidance in that regard, and we anticipate that what we have said before is that here's the minimum standard. You can have this in place, but for the postseason, here are the rules that we have in place, and we were not requiring masking for that. So the school would have to make that accommodation. They really would have a couple of choices: make the accommodation and let that team play without wearing a mask, If they wanted to go to an opposing site because it was a county mandate, they could certainly do that, or they could choose not to play the game, which would in a sense eliminate them from participation, from continuing in that tournament, which is not a result that anybody wants. We do not want that. So we want to figure out how to find that middle ground and what's appropriate for our member schools, and need your input as we move forward. I anticipate this could be an issue for basketball and for wrestling. It will not be an issue for bowling because bowlers wear their masks throughout that competition. It's not that physically exertive activity. And swimming, no one wears a mask when they're competing. So it's really those two winter activities of basketball and wrestling where this is applicable.
Conversations. Mr.
All right,
Herb.
man, I'm gonna ask, because I'm not too familiar with schools that are requiring this, but I assume that there are some schools in the state that if you come to their place, they require their participants to wear masks, correct?
That is correct.
And the visiting team.
Correct. So now, when they go on do they go on the road? Do they play road games?
Yes,
Yes.
they do.
And when they go on the road, I assume they wear their masks, but the team they're playing does not.
Initially, it was the expectation that the home school would wear the masks if they were willing to do that, but they were not required to do that. It caused some games to be canceled. Some schools refused to wear masks in their own gym just because the visiting school wanted them to wear a mask.
And so the issue now for the Activities Association and postseason is if one of these schools that requires masks were to advance to the quarterfinal round and host a game at their place,
That's correct.
then the school.
Can they impose on the visiting school that they must wear a mask in order to host the game or to participate in the game? Fran's going to provide clarification.
Monty, it's
Thank you.
not just quarterfinal games. In 1, 2, 3A, it'd be quarterfinal games. I don't think any of our sites that we currently have require masks for everybody in classes 1, 2, 3A. In 4, 5, and 6A, it would be every game could have this challenge. In some cases, Monty, it's a county mandate. So if two county schools were playing each other, they know they have to wear a mask. In other cases, if it's a county mandate, and if I'm from county, A, and I don't have a mandate and we don't wear masks, but I have to go to the higher seated team at county B, and county B says you have to wear masks if you're here, now we have a problem. Because county A's team doesn't want to wear masks. They haven't been wearing them all year. And especially when we get to postseason, even when we're in smaller groups of 4 in those classes, there will be some of those situations that will come up. And the question is, what do we do when that happens? Because we have a school that is being required either because of their own board action or because of county health department to wear masks, who's supposed to host because they're the higher seed, but the school that's coming as the lower seed doesn't want to wear masks. They find that is a disadvantage. They haven't worn them all year, and now they're being required to wear them in the postseason. Right now, those two schools would just not play in the regular season, but in postseason, that's kind of hard to do. So we're asking, what do we do? Do we say, if you're a masking county and or school, and you're not going to allow the visiting team to come in without masks, if they choose not to wear them, then you've got to go to the other site? If their school boards won't let them play, they can play with masks at the other site, but if their school board won't let them play or their county health won't let them play an unmasked team, then what do we do? That's the the question.
So,
Can I ask this question real quick? How many schools across the state does this involve? Do we have
10 to
that
12,
number?
No, it's more than that.
At least 10 to 12 in the 5A, 6A arena.
So you're talking about almost a third then of the class.
It's all of Douglas County. It's part of Shawnee County, Wyandotte County.
so is that during competition, they also have to wear masks?
Yes, ma'am. That's
And
the issue.
do the referees also and the coaches, everyone has to be wearing them all the time?
That is correct. The coaches have to anyhow by our rule, but the
Well,
officials have to in those
they
counties.
would because they're not in an activity from a personal activity. I didn't realize that some districts were required to do that, and that's from their county health person that's requiring that.
Some cases it's the county, in some cases it's the local board of education.
Okay.
So I've got a little experience. My boys team played for the first time fully masked Tuesday night, and I was in attendance. Also, same school district that's not allowing visiting fans. So there again, the expectations are below what we set for KSHSAA, which they have every right to do. I find it petty. If my team has to go to a school that the expectation is we wear masks, my student athletes will wear masks to compete. I struggle with the other side, Fran, and that's one that I haven't experienced yet, is a team that says their local board or their health department says you cannot compete against another team. So if they were to travel to Olathe North, where in Johnson we do not require masks during competition, and they refuse to play the game because we were unmasked, but they chose to wear theirs. That I have no experience with that. But as far as the other way, if that's the I almost look at it in any other situation of if I played on grass all year and then I have to play on a turf field, that's just part of the expectation. If I play for the Las Vegas Raiders and I got to go to Buffalo and it's snowing, that's just part of the expectation. The mask situation to me seems petty that way. I have no experience, nor do I know what to do in the other direction. If a masked school refuses to play a school because they're unmasked and that's their rules at their home gym.
Jason, I think that there are schools, there are coaches that are concerned, and I don't know if you've talked to any of your players about the difference in playing with a mask properly worn and not playing with a mask, but the particularly if you're not used to playing, physically exerting with a mask, it is different. And I don't know, again, if you've talked to your players, I know part of the challenge is that some of those kids are not properly wearing those masks anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. But yeah, my freshman, sophomore, JV, and varsity, every single one of them wore them the whole time. And then when seated, waited for bus, we were fully masked the entire time we were in the facility. And yeah, I would agree with they don't wear them the right way anyway. So now you put the precedent on officials, like how are they holding them accountable, and coaches holding them accountable. But also at the same time, you're right. Did I go and do a survey after the game? No, I did not. So you're right. And I understand where coaches are coming from. I just, we've got to do what we can to get through this. But I can't go with if a school refuses to play, how we're going to handle that next step.
Again, I understand the comparisons, but I think playing 20 games all year and never wearing a mask, and then now I've got to go wear a mask at an away game. I see that as being a little bit over the top. That's my personal opinion. I would not want my players to have to do that.
So then the discussion here is stemming around if the host site requires the masks, about the possibility of moving that game to the other site, because that team could still be allowed to wear their masks and the other ones that have not been wearing it would not have to. Now,
Or for that school's count, the school to get permission from their county health department to allow somebody, a visiting team to come in and play without masks if they chose to.
okay, and
If they
that's,
don't- if they can't get that provision, then it's possible you move the game.
right. Okay, now it goes back to, I guess the rest of my comment was to be what Jason was stating, that if Olathe North is supposed to go to Hill City and they choose not to come because we would not wear masks, they would be, okay, they choose not to come. Also, we can't go there because we won't wear them and we shouldn't make us wear them to go to Olathe to play the game. If it's not played, well, then Jason's taking the forfeit because he's not coming. And I think that's a determination that they'll have to make. I mean, if they don't want to come and they don't want to play, I mean, there's really nowhere to go because you can't do it at a neutral site. If one school still won't play the team, if they don't wear a mask, and like you just said, Fran, we shouldn't be making them if they went 20 games or 15 games without. And now all of a sudden in the postseason, we're going to ask them to do that. I don't agree with that either. And I think it goes back to, like you said, I mean, it's more, they have to understand it's more than the championship. I mean, if it's truly their biggest health concern, then they would just have to step out and not proceed in the playoffs. And that team that they were scheduled to play would be awarded that win and they would move on. Other thoughts?
Well, it seems to me it's similar to if you have so much COVID in your school that you can't play, you just forfeit the game, and it's a choice that that district is making or that school is making. And when you look at the fact that isn't it KCK that didn't play fall sports, and so they weren't eligible for championships, and so that was a choice they made. And it seems that this is similar, that if the school chooses not to play because somebody's not wearing masks, that's their prerogative. But the consequence is you just simply forfeit the game. And
Yeah, I think the crux of the issue is this one. Home team, county or school district requires masks to be worn of everybody, every participant. The visiting team has not worn masks all year and says, we don't feel like we should be forced because of a school district or county health department regulation, not a KSHSAA rule, to wear masks. So now is it, so the masked school gets the win because they were the host, or is it the visiting team that gets the win because they were following the KSHSAA rules, not the extended rules of the county or the school? I mean, that's who is in the question, who's in the right then? If they don't play the game, who is it that's getting the win?
The other thing to consider with that is there's the KSHSAA rule with all the risk mitigation stuff. And we always say schools have the right to be more restrictive. And I think that's the big question here. So these host schools are being more restrictive than we are. So do we penalize a host school for being more restrictive or not?
And that extension is more restrictive on the opposing team as opposed to more restrictive on their own kids. We understand they can be more restrictive for their kids. Do you want to empower that additional authority for the opposing team when they come in? And I think, as Fran shared, some feel like that may be a competitive disadvantage to have to wear a mask. And is that cross that line? So is that more restrictive piece able to be applied to the visiting team when you have earned the right to host?
Comments? Because you're absolutely, I mean, that's right. That's the interesting piece right there is, you know, is it a competitive advantage?
What's happening to the teams that, so they're supposed to have their mask on and then the mask is down or it's not worn properly? I mean, are they going to, like we've talked before, is it a technical or a warning and then a technical or?
Now that, Shannon, we are not dealing, those are administrative issues. The concerns for the schools are, or we've been told is, if they, if the school administration would say, listen, you guys can't wear your masks right, so therefore we're ending your season. Or if the county health department would come in and say, one of the requirements for you to be able to play in this county was that you were wearing masks and you're not doing it appropriately, we're shutting you down. That's the concern for those schools that are required to wear masks. And I would like to tell you this won't happen, but I guarantee you we are going to have situations that are going to happen. Ken, you're shaking your head because you know in postseason it's going to happen.
It will happen.
I think the teams need to be prepared for that then. We've got to put the word out and say, hey, if you're going to this school, you're going to have to wear a mask while you play. And they practice that way for a day or two or whatever it is. I don't think we can supersede the health departments or the schools if they're restricting that. We're having windows put in today, so it's a little hectic around here. I apologize for that.
I thought you were singing.
I thought you were disciplining a student. I thought your assistant principal was taking care of a student.
Band practice. Okay, so I guess the other side of that is back to what Jason had mentioned. What if it's the other way? Okay, we're supposed to go there, but they won't play us if we don't recommend it or we don't mandate it here, but their county mandates that they have to wear it no matter where they go, and they can't play a team that won't wear the mask. Then what do we do?
To me, that's fairly easy. That's the local host is making that determination. And if the local host isn't willing to wear a mask, then I suppose they advance by a cheap way out. But I don't know how else we do that. I don't think that the visiting team can impose that upon on the host site. That's my personal opinion. That one to me is easier than the other way.
Can I ask this question real quick? Do these mask mandates, do they have an end date, or are they just until the county decides they're going to back off or the school board decides they're going to back off? Could their mandates now say this mask mandate's in effect until February 15th? Well, if we get to February 15th, we haven't started postseason yet, you're okay.
Well, we have been wrestling because that seems like it's about 7 hours away, actually February 6th, but wrestling will start early. We're not aware of calendar end dates for those, Monty. So, and as we have learned with everything COVID, calendars change frequently.
Okay, so what do we, I mean, do we need any action on this, or do we just say it'll be host schools?
If you give us no direction, we're going to maintain, if there's no determination otherwise, the position of the association will be that if the host school requires masking 100% of the time for guests to their building, including players, the visiting players will need to wear a mask even during competition. If you want to take action to the contrary to that, please let us know. But that will be our determination as we move forward, that visiting schools will be required, if that is the rule of the local Board of Education or local health department.
And I think that's sounds great, because that's where the stance has been from the get-go, and I would hate to change that at this point in time.
Well, Alan, it hasn't really been that. Right now, schools who can't agree to that, they just don't play.
Right. No, I understand that, but it's still.
There's no forfeit involved. Now we're changing it because now we're going to make a team forfeit.
Right, but we've always had the stance of local, I mean, it be at local control to make it either more restrictive, as Brent made a comment to.
But that's more restrictive on your people. We're now making it more restrictive on visiting people. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No,
it's going to come up.
Right, and I understand that, and I agree with your comments as well.
So Alan, I just made a phone call. I called my head basketball coach to get some feedback. I was curious. He said, anyways, we practice 70% of the time with masks on until we get full on 5-on-5, and then we pull masks in practice. So he said, we're used to wearing them. He said, it was the expectation. We made sure we practiced hard for a couple of days with masks on when we were going into that situation. It was funny at the end of the phone conversation. His bigger concern is that there's schools that are testing their kids weekly, and people are afraid to play schools that are testing weekly because if we don't find out there was a positive in a game, it could quarantine another school. He goes, that's a bigger issue than masks. But again, and Fran, I understand, and you're playing devil's advocate, I get it. I think from our perspective, it is what it is. I have no problem going with it. I do not have the answer of if I was playing a Douglas County school and they had to come to Olathe North and they said, we will not play unless your players put masks on, and it's not our rule in Johnson County or in Olathe. I wouldn't make my kids wear masks. I wouldn't. But going there, I feel like the majority of my schools, and I'm not wrong, I haven't talked to all the Sunflower schools, would wear the masks because that was the expectation. And that's just how I feel at this point about it.
And I know Fran's playing devil's advocate, but I wholeheartedly agree with what she's saying. I think it's a very difficult ask for a team to go, if they've played 20 plus games, to go into maybe one of the biggest games of the year. Maybe it's that quarterfinal game that is now being at a host site and they're going to wear masks for the first time. I just sitting here though, I just don't know what alternative we can come up with that makes this go away. I mean, if you flip the site to the other site and then they won't come because they won't wear masks, well, that's not fair to them. They had the higher seed to begin with. So I don't have an answer for that. And I think that's probably why we're falling back on home site rules apply, and so I don't know. I totally hear what Fran's saying, and she is right. It will happen. There's no doubt about it.
It will.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here, but those schools who have the mask mandate, at some point in time, they're going to have to choose to go play somebody that's not masked up. If they want to continue through the tournament, they're going to have to go to a site where the site's not going to require masks for all players. So their 5 players will be masked and their opponents won't. And if their school system or their school board says, we won't allow that, then they can't advance in the tournament. Am I correct?
That's correct. It may be a state championship game.
Fran, another question, will you have trouble getting officials to go to these sites where they have to wear a mask as well?
That could be a challenge.
I have seen officials try to wear a mask and that lasts about a quarter to a half at maximum. And those masks will come off and they'll go back on.
That is one of the many potential challenges that we are going to have, you know. In addition to trying to get the right officials there, it's going to be the right officials that will do what the schools want them to do. And we have officials who refuse to wear masks, so.
As of today, Fran, I assume we're not hosting our state tournaments at any site that has a county mask mandate like that.
That is correct, Ken,
As of today.
as of today.
Any further discussion?
So
Well,
what I
let's talk-
have, just for clarification, what I have is that host schools that require masking 100% of the time, visiting teams must wear masks or forfeit the game in the sub-state tournament.
Or vice versa?
And know that we'll work with local health authorities and school districts to try and get that rescinded if that becomes a challenge. I mean, clearly, there are exceptions, and we just don't know how to pursue those because I've not seen the University of Kansas, which is in Douglas County, wear a mask in any of their basketball games, nor put that upon an opposing player. So I just don't know what those exceptions are, and we'll pursue that because, again, we're not trying to create a divisiveness out of this. We're just trying to seek the clarity that is necessary for us to advise schools and prepare schools, just like Lathan North. If they know they're going to play, then let's do that. So let's prepare. So thank you for your input and discussion on that one. I knew that one would be a real challenge for sure. We don't get asked the easy questions. We get those early.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Item 19. Schools non-compliant with COVID-19 risk mitigation protocols.
Certainly, this has been a challenge, and a number of these seem to be occurring primarily in basketball, where we field calls as we do with anything. Just so that you know, just a quick review of what our protocol is. If we get a complaint about any issue, any rule violation, 5-quarter rule being violated, or the quarter rule being violated, the number of games, an ineligible athlete, whatever that happens to be, we just send it back to the school and say, hey, we were made aware of this. Give us some information. That's that due process. That's that information seeking thing. If we find out that there's an issue, then we work with the school to correct it. It's about truth and it's about grace. And it's about trying to get better and to trying to follow all the rules of the High School Activities Association. As a member school, member schools are obligated not to pick and choose what rules that they would follow, just like an official at a ball game doesn't choose, hey, I'm not going to call traveling tonight. There will be no blocking calls tonight. This inbound line doesn't work. Those are rules that are followed, and all of the rules of the association are intended to be followed by all of our schools. Unfortunately, we've had some challenges and from some repeat offenders as we go through a progression, and we wanted to make sure this board was comfortable this week. Thought we might have some guests for you today, and we're probably knocking on the door of calling you back for a meeting to discuss this with a school or two. But when we have schools who are non-responsive to the issues of, let's just say, mask wearing, and this is for spectators, this is for coaches, this is for players on the bench. For whatever reason, we're going to make the schools aware of that by notifying the school, detailing the violation, giving them a chance to respond and take that corrective action. The second report we elevate that to the district level and we make sure the superintendent's involved with that and we move forward. The third offense is one where we believe that that's important for you. And these are separate offenses. If Brent and Jeremy and Rod are all at the same ball game and they note that the player's not wearing it, the coach isn't wearing it, and the spectators aren't wearing masks appropriately, and they all separately contact Fran because she's the basketball administrator, that's not 3 violations, that's one issue. We're going to deal with that. The concern then becomes if there isn't a response that's appropriate or if there isn't action taken by that administration, try and rectify that problem, how do we progress? Well, that third progression would be to come to you, the executive board, to hold those schools accountable for that and just simply ask the question of why are you not doing that? Why are you choosing as a school to not follow this rules? What other rules are you not following? Are you not following the eligibility rules? Are you not following the mandated 20 game limit? Are you not following, the beginning of practice rule, whatever that happens to be? And to expect that accountability as you're all very good at doing, because I know, having sat in your seats, that those are the conversations that you have, those critical, courageous type conversations that need to happen for that expectation to be met. Because in reality, when a rule is not followed, it's not fair, but it's also those rules are in place for a reason. And these rules are in place to allow opposing schools to know they're going into an environment where all of the precautions are necessary for them to feel comfortable to move forward through the remainder of their season. And that's true for the bench personnel. That's true for the officials that work the game. We heard yesterday that 2 key people from the 2A host site are not comfortable in working this 2A tournament. They will leave a huge hole in that host team there. It's not because of anything that happened. It's just about COVID and they're concerned about what that implications may be personally and for their family. But schools are also understanding that when they go into those environments and their teams are exposed to those scenarios, that they are risking their personal health, but also their team health and their team ability to move forward. So we would end up with that third time to be an appearance with you to hold them accountable. The fourth to be the implementation of some type of sanction that you would deem appropriate and would detail to a school that comes before you. And that could be, the inability to host a team. If a team's undefeated, but they fail to follow the masking mandate, they ought not be hosting our events. If a team's undefeated and earned the right to host that first round of a basketball tournament, they shouldn't have that opportunity. Ultimately, no one wants it, but one of the carrots that you have, one of the remedies that you have is to remove that team from postseason consideration or play in that activity or more broad if it needs to be something beyond that specific activity. The last resort certainly would be a suspension. Along the way, special assessments, fines are there. We're not the NBA. We're not Major League Baseball. We don't have a fine system in place for this type of behavior because generally we have very good response from school administrators who, like everybody sitting in this room, are rules followers and they want to see their school comply generally with that. Even when people don't agree with rules, and there are many. Anytime I've done interviews for an AD, I would ask them, so what rule of the association don't you like and what would you like to see changed? And it's interesting to see some of those responses, but the reality of it is, so how do you comply with it? That's the follow-up. So that's something that's unpopular. What do you do about that? Well, we have a process to change rules to be heard. And ultimately our rules do apply to everybody in the situations they're intended. So I wanted to go through that protocol with you, make sure you're comfortable with that and prepare you for the opportunity for C to become your reality sometime fairly soon. Hopefully not, but if we end up there, we want you to be prepared. Questions, comments, concerns? You see that we had persistent violators to come before you. We're not bringing anybody to you now, though some of you may look around your leagues and know we're talking about this school. We're talking about that school. And getting that word out will be helpful for you. There's something certainly that we'll put in our announcements and share with schools as we progress through our tiered response, our progressive response. your thoughts, comments, concerns relative to this protocol.
Floor is open.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, I said the floor is open. If there's any discussion on item 19.
Bill, is the biggest concern being presented back to you mask wearing?
Yes, followed by attendance, exceptions to the attendance. Mask wearing is easy because it's easy for folks to take a picture of that, and they do. Sometimes it's school leaders that are in a site. Sometimes it's fans that do that. We don't want to be the mask police. That's the title that has been given to the association. That's not the desire at all. Our desire is to have schools follow the rules. And but we also know that folks might not be perfect, but that ought to be the exception and an unusual thing, not just the condoned behavior.
Anything further on item 19? Does everybody like the progression? Okay. You don't need an action on the progression, do you, Bill?
No, sir. No,
Okay.
that just, kind of goes to the old adage Cheryl uses all the time, what you permit, you promote. And that certainly is applicable here. So if we're going to permit it to continue, then, we might not as soon have that rule for anybody. So I appreciate your feedback there, and we will proceed accordingly.
Okay. Item number 20, postseason officials fee review. I know there's some handouts in the in our supplemental insurance.
Yeah, these are easier items now, or at least this one's an easier item. We're going to have each of the administrators talk through their respective activities and proposed fees. We do this on a cycle. This is not an action item because there are budget implications, and we'll know better about where our budget is in 2 months when we meet in March. So this is a preliminary, what we anticipate we're going to do for this cycle of review for basketball, cross country, football, and gymnastics. Our administrators do a really good job of looking at historical perspective as well as what neighboring states are doing, similar states to us, and they'll share that perspective as they move forward. So I'm going to have Fran, she's got the first two, and then Mark and Cheryl, and we'll move forward. So Fran, it's all yours.
In basketball, again, if you look at item 20-7, just kind of looking at what other states do, our current rate for our lead up games, until this year, we had 3 levels: a regional level, a sub-state level, and a state level. Since we don't have regionals anymore, we've gone back to just a state or a sub-state level, which is $77.50. If you look at what other states are paying for their lead ups, we're kind of right there in the ballpark. We're not too high, we're not too low. I think we will continue to need to tweak our zone system for mileage. I think for our sites, it's a lot easier for them to figure out. For staff, it's better not to try to assign officials to ride together that don't want to ride together. And for COVID reasons, it certainly is better for us not requiring people to ride together. So we're proposing an increase of $2.50 at the sub-state level, and to try to make the state level a little bit more elite, increasing that by $5. So I think you have the information that we provided for the total amount that it would cost to increase by that amount would be $5,175. In looking at what's being paid during the regular season, again, it's all over the board. But in most cases, our sub-state games in some cases are less than what they're getting paid during the regular season for a game. So as far as cross-country is concerned, we are not proposing any change in the cross-country fee for next year. The only thing that we need to clean up is just what's being paid for mileage per the zone system versus at 36 cents a mile, or make a decision whether to just leave those at 36 cents a mile.
Any questions for Fran before we move to Mark for football? And again, you'll get a second swing at this one and take action in March. All right, Mark?
Yeah, for football, everybody saw our financials yesterday. What a great year. My recommendation, I think we were pretty much same as our surrounding states in a lot of ways, better in some ways. My recommendation for football is to remain the same at this time.
Thank you. And gymnastics, Cheryl?
In gymnastics, I looked at the surrounding states to see what they get, and everybody's different in their format and structure. I did talk to our interpreter, John, to find out how they pay schools for, various events, and they do pay more for an event that is very similar and parallel to what our state event is like. So my recommendation is that we go from $85 to $90 for a state meet. And as you all well know, that's an increase of $45 to our budget because we only have 9 judges. And we have 9 judges that work a state tournament, and we have no other postseason gymnastics events.
Very good. So in all the areas, when there are increases, we'll share with you the intent and how we'll fund that. That will be part of our presentation in March. That's already determined as we move forward, but that gives you an opportunity to think through that. And if there are concerns, please feel free to let us know between now and then. Otherwise, we'll move forward with action in March.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you for that.
Mr. President, this is Mr. Marlin. Could I request at this time the obligatory Mr. Marlin recess?
Yes, sir. I think you're one of a couple that have requested a restroom break.
Well, it is very much appreciated, however you want to word it.
All right, we will recess for 10 minutes. Does that work for everyone? We'll reconvene at 10:31.
Chance.
Okay, I have 10:31. We will proceed. Next item I have is item 21, items from the KSHSAA conference, or items to the KSHSAA consideration.
Right, thank you for the opportunity to just kind of get you going, and this may be a very short discussion. There may be some things that you think of that may need to be added. But the KSHSAA every year holds an annual conference, and part of that conference is to do a classification forum. And even though they moved their conference from April to June 1, 2, and 3 per Fran's communication to us yesterday, they're still going to proceed with the classification forum yet this spring, because they know that it's their opportunity to bring items back to the association at the May meeting, and then have the board receive those items that are supported by the membership for potential rule changes or potential policy changes, and then you table those and take action at the June meeting. So this is the beginning of that. If there are any items that you as an executive board want the KSHSAA to include on their agenda, now is the time to tell staff. We'll write that up. We'll get that submitted. And on behalf of the association, the membership of athletic directors, those that attend, it will be a virtual classification forum. Angelo Chapelone from Shawnee Mission Northwest leads that and does a wonderful job. Matt Johnson's our president this year and has stayed well connected, and they know the timeliness is important for things to be put in place to be implemented for the next school year. A delay to the June meeting for this would mean that things wouldn't be able to be put into place for the following year. So this is a good opportunity for them to provide that input. So any items that you would like to see put forward, let us know, and we will get those written up and submitted on behalf of the executive board and the High School Activities Association.
Okay, is there anything from the executive board that they would like to see?
I have a question for, this is the first time I've experienced this opportunity. Being a former member, KSHSAA, and also being, I was one step from being the president before I became a principal, and my district said, Jason, you need to take your foot out of the AD world. I've been a part of these forums and they're great, and I'm glad that they bring a lot of suggestions. What our process here, if I were to bring up a topic, is it something that all of us as executive board members agree on, then it goes to KSHSAA consideration?
That would be correct. It would come from the executive board. If it's something that just you want to have, that can always come from Olathe North.
Got it. Okay.
The decisions, when that agenda is put together for the classification form, there will be topics from every school. Potentially, they could be school driven. They could be league driven. Many things might come from the Wichita City League or the Sunflower League or the Western Kansas Liberty League, or they could come from the association. So those are really the three places that populate the agenda for the classification forum.
Well, I haven't done my research, and if Mark's still in the room, one of my biggest concerns I had this year, and it was in football, and it was particularly referees calling student athletes numbers on fouls. And, most of our leagues, and I know suggestions, I believe, from KSHSAA is that we don't, identify student athletes. The official that I dealt with was an area supervisor, was very adamant, and did not even like that I even asked him about it. So I was just curious. I know it's an NFHS rule. Is it something that could be changed if I were to bring it? And I guess I'm asking personally. I mean, if it wanted to go through the executive board, great. If I wanted to go through Sunflower League, fantastic, or Olathe North, I'll go any route. I'm just kind of looking for suggestion.
I'll let Mark respond to that first, and then certainly that would be an item that the board could put on to have as a discussion item. But Mark's going to give background first.
Well, yeah, Jason, yeah, I'm obviously, yeah, I'm very aware as he and I talked. If the executive board, this wouldn't even need to go to KSHSAA because I don't have a problem either way. Wanted to say, let's not announce names or numbers, excuse me, we don't announce numbers, names. And I have no problem saying that because it's an option in the rule book. And to be honest, I'm not sold either way. If the board didn't want their numbers said, then we don't need to say it.
I would just ask Jason, why do you have that concern, or why don't you like that?
I think it's kind of that progression of level, and you kind of it was something that it's always been, and again, maybe it's a league rule for me that I've never seen, but an official, usually it's holding on the offense, and that's kind of where it goes, 10-yard penalty, replay second down or whatever. And in this particular situation, I've had some college guys, don't get me wrong, we've done a great job with our officials, and we get some college guys that come off the next level. They don't know all of our rules all the way. They, holding on the offense number 74, and we're like, oh, hey, we just don't do numbers at the high school level, or at least in the Sunflower League in this particular case. And most of them are like, oh, that's great. And it's just identifying those individual athletes on a mistake, right? That's a college level situation. We talk about how we want to limit the way we control our student sections. It's interscholastic. It's not about, being at Duke University and jumping up and down and screaming and yelling and towards other schools. So I kind of looked at it the same way. And I will tell you personally, when I asked this one particular official, he was adamant. Almost into a rude state. So it's not that spot. It was just that idea of, I was kind of looking at it to be across all of our rules in a particular way that, hey, let's just go on that space. Officials, you're right. They do numbers in basketball games, and in soccer, you see a red card on a kid. It's just a particular rule that I've always, considered something that officials, pointing at kids. And maybe it's just me. I was just asking my process, and I had called Mark in particular situation, and he said, yeah, it's their choice based off of it, how it's written in NFHS.
Yeah, and I respect that. I like the consistency part. That'd be nice to be consistent, but yeah, I'm with you.
And I agree with you, Jason. And Mark, what made me think if you said it's an option, that would do nothing to jeopardize your voting power with the NFHS. And I'm thinking maybe a wrestling issue on weigh-ins or something a while back. We weren't following things to a T. Therefore, if I remember right, you didn't have voting privileges with the NFHS because we weren't doing something along those lines. If this is not the case, I would side to and asking that we not identify those.
It would not violate the rule if we were more strict in that situation. If we were less strict, like the wrestling situation, then that created the problem.
Again, in procedure and process, I don't know. It's obviously something that I would like to see occur across the state, all the way through our state playoffs as well. Again, that gets outside of your league contention situations, but if we want to let KIAAA discuss it, I would be fine with that. Again, I'm trying to get all of our peers involved and people to have voice. So I really, again, I don't know which way to go with it. If this is even the appropriate time, I was just asking a question for clarification.
We would recommend, that would be a really good discussion for this executive board to have the input from it. Often the things that you refer to the KIAAA are those things that you just want input on them. And if this is what the state thinks, then this ought to be a policy that we amend or that we enact. And this would be a really good one to have set that way. So we can certainly do that if that's the druthers of the board.
Well, to be the devil's advocate, Jason, and as you mentioned basketball, we do signal the numbers to the scores table oftentimes the announcer announces that and then we flash the number on the scoreboard. So, I'm not real concerned about those kids being identified. We pretty well know anyhow, but basketball is certainly different than we do it 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I agree with that statement. It was just one of those things where it just is, there is no consistency in a football game, where basketball is consistent throughout the entire year. I think that might be the only way. And I am not advocating, by stating that, I'm not advocating that we change the rule to where officials call the numbers in every single game. I just kind of want that consistency piece.
Probably this issue is more in the bigger schools who can link that official to the PA system versus the smaller schools who they can't do that.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I think in a PA system, it's they have that mic and they say it over the thing. I mean, I wanted to shut that mic off so bad, but to be honest with you, my PA guy doesn't know who. Yeah, when they say holding, right, you don't see them do this and they point, they can't guess the number, so you're not being a PA announcement. But you're right, it is different. Again, it's that consistency piece. I would totally recommend sending it to KSHSAA. I'm curious on feedback of what other folks would have to say in different classifications.
And I'll be honest, and I'll just speak, as the coach side of me. I would have not had a problem with it, just for me personally, because they already told everybody they just held anyway because they slapped themselves in the head or they threw their hands up because the flag was on them, but I understand.
Anything further on item 21? Any other considerations for the KSHSAA? Okay, moving on. Item 22, the transfer rule, 18110.
18110 is a rule that we believe may have some interesting interpretations in the months ahead as kids have changed schools because of COVID. They may have traveled away. They may have gone to live with an aunt and uncle, etc. And we want to make sure that we're interpreting it correctly and maybe even recommend a language change. But we wanted to have a discussion with you in terms of how do you intend for this rule to be interpreted. If it's different than the way it's written, then we would certainly bring forth a change, potential change for the board of directors to the language. Because if you read the language specifically, it says if a student's lived and attended school away from home, he or she shall be eligible for inter-school activities upon returning home and attending the home school where they previously attended, etc. I think typically, and the way this was taught to me, was that this rule really applies to a kid who is going on a long-term mission. Might be part of a church group and they spend a year away serving in a third world country and they come back. Mom and dad never moved, siblings probably never left home, just this one student went away. It also might apply to a student who was sent to some type of rehabilitation, maybe in a treatment, and spends a semester getting self-help and then comes back to their home school. I don't believe it was intended to be for a kid to go play football at a different school for this year, play activities in a school different, and then come back to Kansas and have full eligibility. But the language says if the family stayed in the home and the kid went away and came back, that would be the case. And maybe that's the intent. I don't have that long history of it. As I have talked with staff and as we have talked about this issue, I think it was much more along that more conservative approach that I had shared. But I'm a pretty literal person, and anybody that calls here and looks at a rule, they're pretty literal, as are lawyers, and they would win because the language is the language. And if we want to change that language, I think it's worthy of discussion starting with this board. Because staff can make a recommendation, and our recommendation right now is for you just simply to give us input. We'll come back if it's something that you want to have further clarification on. We're certainly willing to provide that, anxious to provide that, but we wanted at least to kick off the discussion with you at this time. We have very few 18-1 transfers every year. Very few of those occur in a given year.
And just from being here a little bit longer than Bill, my experience and what I've been told over my tenure here is exactly what he described. The only other one that I am aware of, we had a situation where kids were sent to a military boarding school in Florida and came back. It was never the intent, I think, to allow people to go live with grandparents someplace else or a friend someplace else and then come back and be immediately eligible. So I would concur with exactly what Bill said. Over a longer period of time, interpreting transfer rules, that is the intent of the rule. What has happened, as is true with several of our rules, is that we haven't kept up with the times. And this is one that, with the term homeschool, if you recall several years ago, we changed the term homeschool in our handbook to base school for the same reason of what homeschools had become. So, I think that it's certainly something we need to look at. It's one of those, you've got to be careful that we don't get it too far down the road before it becomes an abused rule of what it was intended for.
Comments?
Do we have some suggested verbiage here?
We did not prepare any specific verbiage, but it would be pretty easy to define. It would be, staff could do that and bring back to you, Mike. And if you believe the intent is what we believe the intent is, I guess that's the real question today. Then the next step would be for us to bring back some very specific verbiage, or strike the rule altogether, and move it into or under a hardship, or to create some different things. We got a lot of options that we could exercise, but I really am doing a philosophical check more than anything else.
That was going to be my comment is, could this be morphed into the hardship rule? Because it would seem to me that there's some explanation that needs to take place. And as it is written there, I agree with staff that we're just waiting for that opportunity for the wording to be just right, and then put us in a position where that's not what the intended purpose was. So I guess I'm good with rewording that, or perhaps that falls under a hardship. I don't know.
The challenge with it being a hardship is because sometimes these things are choices, and generally our language in hardship situations has to do with, was this unforeseen, unavoidable? Was it a choice to make that decision to go to a military school? Or was it a choice to go to wherever? That's the hard part of putting it under a hardship. Not that it couldn't be done, but it certainly would have it would change that analogy that we use.
Clearly, a huge concern here is, I've got my kids. I'm not happy with the school that they're the situation they're in. They go live with grandparents across town and spend some time there, and maybe homeschool for a period of time and come back. Well, now they're returning to my home after living away from home and attending school away from home. And that is a way around. That's what we're trying to avoid. So we'll come back with language to help clarify that and bring that back to you at a future meeting.
Okay, sounds great. Moving on, item 23, unified bowling.
I don't know about you, but I need highlights for board meetings, and this is certainly one of those for me as I think about opportunities for our member schools. you're going to get a preliminary, very preliminary. I've started to share this with some individuals in the school community, and our staff is really getting the first glimpse at some of this as well, though we've talked about this, just don't have the written document down. But unified bowling, as we move towards a desire of the association as expressed through our regional administrator meetings to provide more inclusive opportunities for students. It's not like an adaptive sport like we anticipate having adaptive activities for our physically disabled students at our state track and field meet and potentially others down the road. This is about allowing those with intellectual disabilities to partner with students without those intellectual disabilities. It is the Special Olympics type opportunity, and the sport that has been identified as bowling. It's taking place in some cases in some schools around the state already, though it's different in structure. We have modeled this a lot after what is working in Nebraska. Nebraska has this, this format is certainly unique to Kansas, but a lot of the stuff that we have stolen from there and will continue to borrow from Nebraska Unified Bowling. They're in their second year, I believe now, this would be their second year. But first, knowing what it is and knowing who the key stakeholders are is most important. The athlete is that student who has that intellectual disability, who is identified by code. It's that student in your school that has that IEP for one of the identifiable reasons. We know that needs a little bit more sustenance, and we will certainly provide that. The partner is a student, one of their peers in that school, a non-intellectually disabled student who wants to be part of this, is one of the buddies, is a partner to the athlete, and they are teammates. The coach is just like any other coach. Someone that's employed by the school district that meets all the requirements of Rule 10. A team is a team of 5 individuals, a team as we're proposing, and all of this is open to being tweaked. Of that 5 players, 3 compete at one time. That's a trio team, and they're doing all Baker. And athlete, the intellectually disabled student that is part of the school community, will bowl frames 1, 4, 7, and 10 in every game in Baker. Remember, Baker is where we take turns. So if Fran and Cheryl and Bill are on the same team, Bill would bowl the first frame, Fran and Cheryl, then Bill again in frame 4. Then Fran and Cheryl, and then Bill again, and then Bill finishes up frame 10. You can have 5. The other 2 are alternates, one of which could be, one of those must be one of the athletes. You can have 2 athletes and 1 partner in a competition if you choose to do those. And by the way, these teams are co-ed. There's no necessity to have boys versus girls in this. The requirements for each of those are there, and certainly getting kids ready to participate, having some type of screening is necessary. The partner, again, is there. I just lost it on my screen. I think I'm having some connection issue. I'm going to turn to the side and read as Brent is scrolling through. And then the coach, the National Federation has an outstanding course called Coaching Unified Sports. And I think that would be appropriate, having taken that course and reviewed it more recently. I took it my first year here at the association and revisited it just this past year. That would be a great course, not just for the coaches, but also for the partners to take, the students that are going to be participating with, but also coaching the athletes that are on their team. So those would be some of the minimal requirements. We believe that the season, and this was based upon feedback that came through the regional administrator meetings, that the right season would be late fall, early winter. This season actually leans more towards the late fall and not as much into the winter, though it approaches that. It kind of gaps between those. This is always designed to end the Thursday before Thanksgiving. This format ends the Thursday before Thanksgiving with a state tournament. The week before that would be regionals. And then the 4 weeks before that would be competition. The 2 weeks before that, so starting on standardized calendar week 13, which is late September, would have been this year, September 28th, would be practice. 2 weeks of practice, and then competition after those first 2 weeks of practice. 4 competitions seems to be the right. We can certainly increase that as we move forward, but it gives that opportunity for 4 competitions. The one thing this does is this causes students or would be on top of buffer week. So it would have to be a philosophical discussion from this board and then ultimately the board of directors. Do we make an exception for buffer week for those involved in unified bowling? Maybe sacred ground, maybe something that we do not want to do. Competition format, everything is six games. The actual competition would be 6 games, where the athlete bowls at least 4 of those frames. If you have 2 athletes bowling, it might be the 1st and the 2nd frame, the 4th and the 5th frame, the 7th and the 8th frame, and the 10th frame. You can make substitutions within a game, an athlete for an athlete, a partner for a partner, but once an athlete or a partner is removed, they do not re-enter that game. They may re-enter that match in the subsequent game because there are 6 games. It would go fairly quickly to do 6 games in Baker. I didn't get Cheryl's take on that, but time for a Baker game it's pretty minimal. So a match here would probably be, somewhere between, 35, 40 minutes, give or take 5 or 10 minutes, and you can get 6 matches in. Depends on how many pins you knock down and how efficient they are. The best bowlers are going to get through a Baker game in 5 or 6 minutes, probably, because they are just boom, 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 boom. But we may not knock as many down here. Because it's 6 games, you do 3 on one lane, everybody on the same lane, and then 3 on one of the lanes of the opposing team. And it depends if it's a duel, you just switch. If it's a try, you go, you just do a rotation. Quads and tournaments would certainly have unique structures as well. This is not something where we use bumpers. General rules and just some general things to think about. Where we think this would start in one classification, certainly could grow from there. Cooperatives are fine, no problem with that. We believe it would be appropriate to have ability to waive the 8-semester rule for our athletes. Many of our students with IEPs do not graduate until they're or done with services until they're 21. That doesn't mean that they can have 7 years of competing. They would still only be afforded 4 seasons, just like a partner would have 4 seasons. An athlete in unified bowling or unified activities, I think, would be appropriate for them to have 4 seasons. That mirrors the Nebraska model, for instance. The age requirement would be in place, so special consideration would be provided for an athlete who is 19 or 20, has not had those 4 seasons, would have that opportunity to participate and compete. One of the things I didn't mention, as a school, you can have any number of teams during the regular season. So, we do a varsity and a junior varsity. That's going to be subject to, what is available in terms of capacity at bowling centers and how many teams are participating and where you can get practice and competition time. But I could see this more on the, if we're going to be inclusive, we're going to run out of kids before we run out of uniforms, much like the true middle school model, unlike the high school model, which is, okay, we've got this many uniforms, we're going to have this many teams, and we cut down to this. We want to be inclusive. It's going to be, how many kids do we have that want to participate? There will be limits, certainly, but that is there. So postseason, though, would be just 1 team per school. So that's where it does become, because every kid might have up to 4 matches. Those that go to a regional or qualifying round, if it's necessary, would have 5. Those that go to state would have 6 in the season and a nice 8-week season, and be able to make it through that competition in that regard. So I'm interested in feedback. I've got this out to One of our school administrators who has really been a driving force and a great support for this. We'll share it with our partners at Special Olympics Kansas as well. But I wanted you to have a first blush. If we're really missing something, if that you are concerned about any of those areas, please let me know now or let us know, and we'll look forward to taking next steps. The goal would be to have this finalized in rule format for you for your March meeting, so it can be placed on the Board of Directors agenda for our April 29th meeting this year. That's been the timeline we've had, and my apologies for just getting it to you here in mid-January.
Greg?
Bill, yeah, I have a question. I heard you mention only 4 seasons would be allowed. Could a person say they're a junior? You could still only participate in 1 season each year, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
But unified bowling is different than high school bowling. Rule 45 deals with interscholastic competitive bowling, for your kids. That's a totally different activity than unified bowling. Jeremy asked the question this morning, can a kid be on the unified team and on the school team as a partner? Yes, absolutely. As an athlete, I guess if they're good enough to do that, and we know where the state championship's going. But yes, absolutely.
That was my question. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I think we will look for that information come March, and we'll make a decision in March at the March meeting.
Very good. Thank you.
Item 24.
Item 24 is kind of coming out of a desire to, we continue to evaluate, we continue to assess the process and the progress and the effectiveness of the Activities Association. And this is an opportunity, potentially, again, this is an input opportunity for you. This is a consultancy review protocol. All of us are familiar with, what Advanced Ed does now, or what used to be the North Central Association, where we do accreditation visits and you bring in a team and you have the opportunity to get input. And that input is designed to make you better. Well, as an association, I always want to get better. And I want to get better using input from our governing boards, from our membership, from our stakeholders. This is a very specific way to look at a particular topic, and it has come to the attention of many that the governance, the way that we are making decisions and we govern the association is one of those that we've experienced at a much higher level because of the challenges that we have faced recently. And this would be an opportunity just to look at that structure. I'm not saying it's broken. I'm just simply saying that, is this a way for us to do this? And if it's not, now is not the right time, or if this is not the right topic, I'd really like to explore the right time and right topic to bring some experts together to go through this type of a consultancy review that allows for input to be received by the staff, input to be received and shared with our governing boards, so that if modifications are called for, that's great. I don't want to go through a protocol where someone just pats us on the back and says, hey, well done. If that ends up being the outcome, great. But I really want to get better. I really hope that as an association, we're not always just satisfied with where we are, but instead we have the opportunity to look at where we are and how we can get better. And I believe that this would afford that opportunity. So the essential question, or the critical question that I developed in regard to kind of, one of those governance issues is, our whole structure of governance, is it designed to effectively and efficiently support the mission and the leadership of the association? Some of those, clarifying questions or those follow-up questions that kind of support that you see on the screen is, how do we develop a policy? How are policies amended? What's the cycle for that? Is it impossible to see rules changed? Is the length of time that we follow to get rules changed appropriate? Because these are important decisions, and if it's hard to do that, or if it takes time to do that, that's okay. because make sure you get it right. It gives folks time to be involved. And maybe it's just our structure. We want people to feel included and part of what we're doing. And if this is the right way to do it, let's keep on going and let's double down on our efforts to educate our community and our stakeholders. This is the system that we have in place. Take advantage of it. It's one thing to say you don't have an opportunity and you've never tried. It's another to say I've got an opportunity to do it. I've gone through that process and we just simply decided not to accept it. That doesn't mean that we weren't attentive to it. It just means that the system works. And maybe the system that we've got now is the absolute right system. And so, looking at that, we have a large board. Make no mistake about it. As we've called 78 folks together, typically only twice a year. And this body is a subset of that board. That's a large body. There's not another association that governs with that large number of participants and representatives there. At the association, at the Interscholastic Activity Association level, but certainly there are in government, with representatives at the state and local, state and national level. They're very large bodies. Getting consensus and building that and driving that certainly is there. We have the two governing boards. The benefits, the limits are assuming that those are the right way for us to go with this large board, or do we have the duties distributed appropriately? What role do we have, and do we have the right advisory groups? Asked staff a couple of times, why do we not have officials on our as an advisory group to our board of directors? And maybe that's a group that should be represented. I know the history is when there were appointees that were put in place, state board appointees. We made sure, and the staff made sure, it wasn't me, but made sure that there was always an official that was part of that slate of folks that were considered and brought in. So certainly something to look at there. And then I'll be brutally honest with you, is that we don't pick the board of director members. They come from leagues, but when we went to find a person to represent the ethnic and racial diversity to serve on this board, executive board, we didn't have one available, and that was disheartening to me, and I think it was disheartening to you. We want our leadership and governing boards, just as you do, to represent those that they serve. So those are some of the clarifying questions. To accomplish some of this and to review, I think developing a team that is kind of a hybrid team of those outside experts to come and join some of the Kansas experts would be a very healthy process to go through. In terms of state association executive directors, those that are most like us are probably those states that are right around us. Those contiguous states. If we were to bring 4 state association executive directors together for input, I'd want to bring in and consult with my counterparts in Colorado and Nebraska, Oklahoma and Missouri. They border us, they make sense. If we're looking for states that are most like us in terms of size and activity offerings, it might be Oklahoma, Iowa, Missouri, and Nevada. If we wanted a breadth of disbursement of executive boards, we take one from each pair of sections that represent the federation. We're going to get somebody from the East Coast and the West Coast and a couple from the middle. So certainly, we'd have some options there. I think it would be important to have somebody from the National Federation staff. That may be a current or it may be a retired administrator. Someone that is representing the Kansas Association of School Boards. What an important organization in Kansas, and what valued insight that they would be able to provide for us. KASB or USA Kansas the same way. Our school administrators organization would certainly be able to provide great perspective and to work collaboratively with others on a team to do this. A representative from KNEA, from KSDA, and then certainly a representative of the executive board. And I just simply recommended it, whoever the president is for next year. Alan, I'm not trying to move forward, but this is not a process that we're just going to put together. And this has to happen over a period of time. There has to be a preparation time, and the time has to be right for us to do that. Some of the things that I think would be important for us to do in terms of meeting information is that, we're looking at the earliest to bring folks together for a 1 or a 2-day meeting would be the summer of 21. That's this summer, sometime in July, after we go to our meeting and we begin that plan for the next year. It gives us that opportunity. We could do it before that, but there's no need to rush a process like this. In terms of prepping for that, certainly it needs to be folks that are well versed in our operations and how we run business and what our governance structure is. And what are those things? People that think that we don't do anything, all I have to do is hold up the synopsis of change that we share with you at our first meeting in September every year. We're a busybody. We have a lot of things that happen both at the executive board level with manual and activity championship updates, but also at the board of directors level. There's changes that do occur, certainly this year more than any others. In 2009, there was a legislative post audit. I'd be happy to send you the link to that, and I'll just include that in a weekly update for you to kind of review that. But one of the 3 topics that executive or that legislative post audit did back in 2009 was to address the concern, and it's not a short document. It's a healthy document, but was just to review the governance. They also looked at some of the financials, and they also looked at some of the season limits and provided a report for that. So that learning is not lost. It's important to learn from that and to utilize that, but certainly could be a resource for folks as we move forward. Kansas is very diverse. It's diverse by size of school. It's diverse by geography and the structure of schools. And, the reality of every day in Olathe, Kansas, or Johnson County is very different than the reality in Finney County or out in Western Kansas, where it's rural and there's travel, and it's what resources do we have may not be the same. What access we have may not be the same. So, I felt like that we could conduct this and have some meeting time, have some focus groups. We could have some review. We could do the things that need to happen. Certainly probably should add officials in there as an advisory group as well. They're so important to what we do. And then take those findings and be transparent with this. We're not trying to hide anything. This association is proud of the fact that we are responsive to our member schools. We just want to do it in the most effective and efficient way. We don't want to rush to a rule change. Goodness, what did we propose yesterday? That we would have 3 years after a rule change to keep it in place before we modified it again in regards to classification, if the board supports that. So there's a commitment to that. But our governance structure changed 30 years ago or close to that. It was 92, I think, or 93, and Mr. Castle can give us that history where we went to the current model of expanding our governance board to its current level of more than 60. This year it's 78, and that's a large. And it can be a little bit less than that, but there will always be at least 60 by state statute and by handbook bylaw. So it kind of gives you an idea of what I was thinking in terms of an opportunity for us to bring in some experts, to work with some local experts, to provide a review on this topic or any topic, and to identify the right time for it. My hope today was to present this for you, to give you this document, to give you some time to reflect upon it, and to bring it back in March for us to take action. And that action may be, it's not worth the time and effort, or the action may be, bring this back in a year where we're not dealing with COVID, where we're not having to address some of the challenges that have consumed us this past year. But it's also a time why it might be a good time is this is all fresh in our mind. This is how we have lived in terms of this decision making. And we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to it. And we're never going to be in a business where we make everybody happy. Just like any official, 50% of the call, 50% of the block chart calls, the fans are happy, 50% of them. And likewise with the coaches, the other 50% are not so happy. So we've got to come to that point where we understand that. So we have to do what we believe is best for our member schools, our state association, and this might provide that opportunity for us to do so. So again, I wanted to bring that to you, to share that with you, and certainly welcome your comments to see if this is the right thing for us to be doing at this time.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions on item 24? I look forward to the information that you'll bring back to us in March, Bill. Okay, hearing none. Topics from the floor.
Have we heard from the KCK schools yet on their football?
We have not. I will keep you apprised of that and make sure that you're aware. When that time comes, you will know. I have 4 items for you that are separate that we need to make sure that one I would like to deal with in executive session at the end. If you don't have topics, I have 3 that I want to just make clarification on.
Okay. Anybody have any topics? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Okay, it's yours, Bill.
All right, very good. One quick question and clarification for you is on 18.14. 18.14 is our rule that as a student that is transferring from a non-member school, any student that transfers from a non-member school is eligible only at the non-varsity level for their first year, at the high school level for the first 18 weeks, at the middle school level. We're going to have a different response to kids on 18.14 in the spring of 2021 than we would for any student that is on the limited eligibility. And we've tried to equate those two in recent years. And an 18.16 kid is eligible at the varsity level for anything they weren't rostered in the previous year. We're comfortable with that being the rule in a non-COVID year. But in a COVID year, this spring, anybody on 18.16 is eligible at the varsity level in the spring because they were not rostered in the spring. The 18.14 non-member school transfers would not gain that eligibility unless you help us provide a different interpretation at this point. The few that I have had contact me, I've said, no, you're still eligible only as a non-varsity athlete under 18.14. 18.14 trumps that 18.16 component. I believe that it would be okay, and it will probably be easier for our schools as they move forward if we treat those the same for this spring. And a student under 18.14 transfer from a non-member school would not be restricted to non-varsity. Part of that is we're going to have some kids that may have homeschool that are coming back to their member school, and they did not participate last spring in any activity. They were not rostered, and we'd like to see them have that opportunity. So the interpretation that we would like to provide is the student would have that additional level of eligibility in the spring. Will make it easier for our school administrators that are dealing with that eligibility. It's a benefit for those kids, and it helps treat them the same as students that are coming to, on that limited platform.
Any comments?
This would just be a 1-year deal based off of losing our spring season last year to an extent.
That is correct. This is a 1 semester, 1 season relief for them. This is not an extended. This is 1 season of relief, which is what is being afforded to any student who's transferred under the limited provisions.
So Jason, as Bill and I talked about this, part of the challenge is going to be, so a kid came to you on an 18-1 tour. They played basketball at the JV level for January, February, then they go out for track. They're eligible at the varsity level. But then next fall again, they're gonna go back to JV eligibility and whatever they would do in the fall until January of the next year. That's the challenge that school administrators may have.
Anything further? Okay, next item, Bill.
So I want to make sure that I have clarity on that. We do or do not have your blessing to provide that release from 18-1-4 because those kids were not participating in their non-school setting or any setting last spring.
Is that, yeah,
You do have our blessing.
how about blessing?
Okay, I
Yeah.
see enough thumbs up. I don't know if that's a majority, but that will be the interpretation that we provide for consistency's sake. That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that. The next item is a basketball item. I should have included it with our discussion yesterday, and it slipped my mind. But as we prepare for postseason and schools earn the right to host, there may be some challenges to the facilities. And I'm not talking about seating. I'm talking about spectator restraining lines. And I'm going to defer to Fran to have her provide the perspective on this and the recommendation from the association. So Fran?
So when we look at identifying state or sub-state sites, I've done a specific about sub-state sites, we do not, at least unless we're just desperate, we try not to use anybody that has to play with a restraining line. For those of you who do not know what a restraining line is, if there is not at a minimum 3 feet of space out of bounds, you have to paint another line inside that line that is 3 feet inside that. So you've got a total of potentially 6 feet or less if there's less than 3 feet and that becomes that boundary line for all throw-ins. For people who haven't played with it, it is a little bit confusing from time to time. So we try really hard not to have the primary host sites have restraining lines. With our quarterfinal games for the state tournament being played at higher seeded teams, I have concerns about playing those games at a site that all they have is restraining lines. Now, mind you, those sites generally have very limited seating, but it's the restraining lines that are the issue. If we have a higher seeded team that plays with a restraining line, do we go to the other team if they don't have a restraining line, or do we go, if we have to and they both have restraining lines, do we try to find a neutral site? Do we just let them play at the side of the school with the restraining line? I'm just trying to figure out the best way. I don't think playing the quarterfinal state basketball games on a court with a restraining line is probably our best idea.
And our recommendation from staff would be to move it to the opposing site, to a site without a restraining line, because that alters the game in a fundamental manner. And while it's provided in the rule book, there are other options, and we don't want to take a game away from a team that has earned the right to host that quarterfinal game, but they know they have some limitations, and if they know that going in, they might be able to find a neutral site.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask, but is that much different than coming to a school that's gonna require masks?
I think, Monty, you've been in some of the small schools that are playing with restraining lines. I think it is a certain disadvantage to do that. And right now, you know, that's my opinion. And I think that's going to be the opinion of most coaches.
I think the only way that we could allow that to happen would be if both schools had restraining line, they would know the how that works. But otherwise, I don't think we ought to play there.
And I would agree, Mike, if they both have restraining lines that they play with during the regular season, that's one thing. But I'm pretty confident I'm going to have this situation, and I want to be prepared for it.
Is this mainly a 1A problem, or is there bigger schools that have restraining lines?
This is generally our smaller school. It could be a 2A, but it's primarily 1A and 2A schools.
Because I know a lot of our league has the restraining line around the courts in our league.
And we have allowed them to host, Roger, quarterfinal sub-state games, even if they had a restraining line. But
True.
they haven't hosted. We have tried not to have them be the primary host site for a sub-state. In other words, all games wouldn't be played there. But your Monday, Tuesdays, quarterfinal sub-states we have. It's just that this is different because we're now moving to, this is the quarterfinal game of our state tournament, which typically would be played at a large arena.
And that's the biggest difference. You know, those schools would be typically going to Dodge City or Emporia or well, not Emporia, but they'd be going to their 1A site, Division I or Division II site, for this surrounding game, and none of those would have restraining lines.
Any more input? Yes, Bonnie.
Bill and Fran, with your last comments, I think that's convincing for me is if they're not allowed to host the sub-state semifinal or final, why would they be considered to host a quarterfinal state round?
That logic doesn't make sense. You're allowed to host it, now you're not allowed.
Bonnie, did you have something?
Well, other than, it's not an option on that, what we're calling the state quarterfinal game. It's probably not an option to try and find a neutral site to play that game. Because
I think, Monty, yes. I mean, if the school, the host school had restraining lines and they couldn't, you know, they can't host, could they find another place to host their game? I think we would give them that option. But understand that they only have a Sunday to get that done.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at it from the old coach's standpoint. You work that hard and then you get the opportunity to have that home court advantage. And then all of a sudden, because of your court, you lose that home court advantage to the team that you're playing. I wouldn't be as concerned about losing my home court advantage if I were playing at a neutral site.
Okay, so number one, Monty, I think I just said that, is if I win on Saturday and I'm a school that has a restraining line, I know I cannot play my game on Monday at my school.
Right.
If you can find a neutral site that will let you play on Monday that doesn't have a restraining line, I don't have a problem with them doing that. The problem is you're going to find out on Saturday that you're now hosting and you're going to have to find a neutral site that will let you host.
And would your opponent have to be in agreement of the site that you chose?
I think the Activities Association would have to approve it.
Okay.
It could be an hour further down the road, which could be an issue for the traveling team.
And it could possibly be I choose a league school that has that we're familiar with, and I don't know. I don't see an issue with it. other than, I guess if I knew I was in that situation as an administrator or a coach, and I knew I had a team that could possibly advance, then I might be doing some legwork ahead of time to try and get something prepared in case my team won and I knew we couldn't host.
And I would agree totally, Monty. I think if I were in that position as an AD, I'd be finding, I mean, the majority of these schools are in, that have restraining lines, as Roger mentioned, several of them in his league. The kind of north central Kansas and northwest Kansas. And I think both of those areas have the possibility of other places that could host as a neutral site if the school wanted to get them to be able to do that.
Well, representing 2A schools, and there are a few 2A schools that still play with restraining lines. I don't have an issue with this proposal. I don't. Roger may disagree because he's mostly dealing with 1A schools, and I'm pretty sure that they may have that issue. But I think for the most part, most 2A schools now are playing on regulation courts.
We're mainly talking the Monday, March 8th and March 9th games.
Those are the only games we're talking about.
Okay. I'm kind of like Monty. I would say if one of our schools or a 1A school knows it ahead of time, then they better be prepared for it then.
Well, that's the direction that we'll take. And again, it won't be a surprise. You know, they'll be thrilled that they won. Now they'll just have to enact the plan that they have put in place if they're going to go to a neutral site, if they're going to travel.
Now,
Very good.
now, once again, if both schools do have restraining lines, they'll still play at that host school, right?
Okay. The one that earned it, correct. Okay. My third item for you in terms of a topic from the floor is I just want to make sure that on seating limits that you just have a quick refresher of what we're going to do for postseason. In basketball, we're going to share the attendance between the two teams. There's not going to be an imbalance as best we can. For that, it will probably be an allocation to the two participating schools in a particular contest. So that is easier to do in basketball. In our quasi-team sports of wrestling and bowling, well, the other easy one to deal with is swimming. We're probably not going to have attendance in swimming. In fact, we know we're not because there is no place to put students participating in the meet and have them socially distanced and have spectators in the bleachers. So it's unfortunate, but that's going to be the reality. But in bowling and in wrestling, those are quasi-team sports. We want to have students represented, and based upon the number of students that are qualifying from a particular school and the facility in which they're going to compete, there's likely going to be a limit of 1 or 2 students for a wrestling tour, 1 or 2 parents or guests for a wrestler, depending upon the site, because wrestlers are probably going to have to sit in bleachers too. If we're using the gym floor for mat space, there's probably going to be some limits there. Bowling, the same. Bowling will have some teams qualified. They'll get a greater allocation, much like we did in cross country. Every cross country team got 30 tickets. Well, Cheryl will do a good job at dividing out the number of teams that are participating and the number of seats that would be allocated. But wrestling is unique, and it wasn't part of the proposal yesterday. And I just wanted to make sure, that you are aware that we're going to treat those as much as we can with unity. But quasi-team sports and team sports are very different in terms of, and facilities are different in terms of how we'll allocate those tickets out. So just a quick review of that for your benefit. If you've got concerns on that, we certainly want to address those. We're going to get concerns, and we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And the concerns will come from the parents that don't get in to watch. There's not a great answer to this. As we've said from the beginning, the goal is to get to postseason. If we're there, we're thrilled the kids will have that opportunity, and we want them to be the big events that they typically are. This is a year where that's going to be possible.
Any questions or comments for Bill on the postseason and ticket allocations? Okay.
Okay, my final item then, President Stein, I would ask that we would entertain a motion if you're so inclined to go to executive session to discuss the data relating to the financial affairs of the association, which is one of those items that allows for us to go to an executive session. I anticipate that this would be a 10-minute executive session.
So move.
Entertain, motion by Greg,
Second.
second by Ken. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. We will enter an executive session for 10 minutes.